Chapter 1561. Seai placed the documents on the desk and asked after a while, "Does it look bad?" Maisie sneered. "Why doesn't it look good? The most important thing is that you like it. You're not wearing a skirt only to let others admire you. Women should only dress up to please themselves, not others." After putting on a skirt, Seai looked a little more feminine. Her appearance had always been above average, she had strong facial features, and a hint of heroic and assertive pride could be sensed coming through her eyes. She looked quite handsome when she dressed up as a man. Now that she had kept her hair longer and worn a skirt, she was giving off a different vibe. As for why Seai had suddenly undergone such a change, Maisie had seen through it but did not expose her. Thus, she did not ask much. After submitting the documents, Seai left the office and ran into Quincy in the corridor. Quincy looked up, saw Seai, and was slightly surprised. He was stunned for a few seconds, then quickly walked up to Seai, pulled her to the stairwell, and took a better look at her. "Why are you dressed like this?" she asked. "Why can't I dress like this?" Quincy was stunned and looked away. "That's not what I mean. It's just that it's not appropriate for you to dress like this in the company." Seai stared at him. "You told me that you like women who wear skirts." He was astounded. Since when did I say that?" "The night before." "Have I said that?" "You said so after you got drunk." When it came to that incident, Quincy felt very regretful, so he raised his hand to cover his forehead. It was indeed a mistake to drink that much. "I really don't remember what I did, and I don't remember what I said either." Usually, when he was completely drunk, there was no way he could do anything, and if he had done anything in a partially drunk state, he would surely remember it. However, he had no impression of what had happened the night before at all, so it was obvious that he was completely drunk. He only knew that there was a huge bite mark on his neck when he woke up. And it had not disappeared in 2 days. Quincy asked, "For real, what did I do that night?" Seai stared at him, still not answering the question. Quincy started to feel guilty after being stared at by her. "But now that I have the time to think about it carefully, if I tried to do something to her after all the drinking, with those martial arts skills that she possesses, it would be impossible for me to have succeeded. Not only do I not have any impression of what happened, but I also don't even have a sense of experience. I'm indeed a total failure this time around." He took a deep breath. "I really don't remember what happened the night before." After saying that, he suddenly felt like an irresponsible scumbag and immediately explained with a smile, "I don't mean anything else. I'm just telling you the truth." "So, why don't you tell me what happened?" Seai crossed her arms. "How am I supposed to tell you that?" Quincy gave off an embarrassed expression. You can just describe it." Seai narrowed her eyes. "Shouldn't you say something like you'll take full responsibility for what you've done?" He was dumbfounded. "What? Many dramas put forward such scenes too, don't they? After a man and woman slept together, the man would always tell the woman that he'd take full responsibility." Quincy looked at Seai and wanted to laugh so badly, but he held it back. How on earth can she utter such an innocent statement in such a serious manner? Quincy did not dare to give it to her straight. "Do you like to watch such brainless dramas?" She was slightly confused. "Isn't it true?" He took a deep breath and calmed down. Those actors were only acting in the dramas, taking up full responsibility. There aren't many men who can do that in reality. Men aren't as simple as you think they are. "Aren't you a man? Shouldn't you know pretty well now if I'm a man?" He was furious. "So are you saying you don't want to be responsible for what happened?" Quincy choked on his own words, unable to speak. A man can definitely distinguish whether a woman is faking her innocence or not. Most of them only choose to turn a blind eye and act dumb voluntarily most of the time. Chapter 1562. After all, a man will surely be able to sense it when a woman has a thing for him. And if a man were to be a master at distinguishing bitches, he'd definitely have a more critical and lethal vision than a woman who's a pro at distinguishing scumbags. I've been by Mr. Goldman's side for such a long time, and I've seen all sorts of coquettish women. Even when it came down to Willow back then, I wouldn't say that I had a good impression of her. It was just that I thought she was Mr. Goldman's savior. That was why I showed her some respect reluctantly, but Seai is truly not pretending. Apart from being a pure and simple woman, she's brutally honest too. There's nothing that she wouldn't say. If this is the case, I believe I've never laid a finger on her. After all, I was so drunk that I was powerless, but Seai might have misunderstood the meaning behind sleeping together. Let me ask you something. Did you sleep with me the other night? Seai nodded. Quincy looked straight at her. What did we do? Seai thought about it and stared at his neck. I bit you in the neck. He smiled and pointed to his neck. Is this all? She nodded again. Then there's no need for me to take up any responsibility as we basically didn't do anything. But we slept together. We didn't do anything. Seai was silent for a while and asked, what else do we need to do? Quincy laughed. Of course, it's something that can get you pregnant. Seai slapped him. Pervert. She then turned around and left. Quincy rubbed the cheek that got slammed by her palm, which felt neither painful nor itchy, feeling a little piqued and aggrieved. I was just explaining things to her. How does that make me a pervert? 2 days later. As soon as Tristan and Noce's plane landed in Octavia, Thomas personally came to the airport to welcome them. Thomas and Tristan stood in place, reminiscing about the old days. When he noticed that someone was staring straight at him, he turned his head and met Noce's gaze. Thomas could not remember him. This is... Tristan replied with a smile, he's my nephew, Noce. Thomas was surprised. Didn't this child get poisoned by Madame Noce back then? Tristan knew what Thomas was thinking and explained calmly, he's a lucky boy, but he doesn't remember anything. To put it bluntly, he was suffering from amnesia. Thomas nodded in a daze. I see. Noce got into the car first, followed by Thomas and Tristan. The two talked throughout the whole journey in the car while Noce kept staring out the window as if he was unconcerned about what they were talking about. When Thomas asked him how long they would be staying in Octavia, Tristan paused for a few seconds and then replied, it'll take a while. Thomas nodded. That's fine. It's never a bad thing for young Master Noce to retrieve his lost memory. But something came to his mind, and he said, it's a pity that Daisy and her brothers returned to Basberg a few days ago. Tristan suddenly stopped talking and looked at Noce. Noce looked indifferent as if he had not heard it at all. Jackie and Violet were waiting for them at the Clifford mansion. When Thomas, Tristan, and Noce walked into the living room, Violet noticed the teenager who came in behind Tristan. Before this, she thought that Nolan's 2 twin sons had inherited their father's ethereal appearance, but unexpectedly, this young man's temperament and appearance were not inferior to theirs. The profundity of his mixed-race facial features and the cold and refined temperament coupled with each other so perfectly that no fault could be found. Jackie, Viv, this is the eldest grandson of the Noce, Noce. Thomas introduced him to both of them. Jackie knew about Noce, so he did not react much, but Violet looked surprised. The eldest grandson of the Noce? Doesn't that make him the young master of the Noce? So, the boy that my little sweetheart has a thing for is this young man? She suddenly remembered Colton's description, and it seemed that Noce was by far the only person who truly met all the requirements that the future son-in-law of the Goldman should have. Chapter 1563. Does it mean that Zephyr stands no chance already? At Basberg, at the Goldman mansion. Nolan summoned Colton to the study, and the latter pushed open the door. Dad, are you looking for me? Nolan turned the laptop toward him and went straight to the point. Are you the one behind what happened to the Noce? Colton knew that he could not hide it from his father, so he admitted it right off the bat, yes. If you want to do something, at least do it cleanly. He closed the lid of his laptop but was not angry. "I'll have to clean the mess for you when it's been discovered." His son had hacked somebody else's company's system. Although he did not do anything terribly wrong, and the other party did not suffer any loss, Tristan had asked him to investigate the issue. He had tracked it back to his son's doing, making it difficult for him to make it clear to the Knowles. Colton was momentarily stunned and sounded very sure. "It's impossible for them to be able to track me down." "Nothing is impossible." Nolan lifted his gaze. "Others will be able to track you down if I can do so. It's good to have confidence, but if you're overly confident, it's easy for you to start to take something lightly and lose a battle in the long run. Take this as a small lesson." Colton's hacking skills were top-notch, but he was too confident that his skills were impeccable. A small oversight and flaw were enough to leave some clues behind. Colton pursed his lips tightly. "I was indeed too confident in my skills. If someone else were to find out about this before Dad did, then I'd indeed cause Dad a lot of trouble." After a long time, he lowered his head and apologized for his attitude. "I'll improve on that in the future." "You are going to take over the company in the future. You have to always remind yourself of the consequences of being slightly sloppy. You're good enough, but don't forget that many excellent individuals exist in this world." Nolan enlightened him patiently, and Colton listened to him. "I know what my shortcomings and faults are. All I have to do is to correct them. Those who don't listen to others' advice and don't want to make progress can only stay where they are. I know this very clearly." He walked out of the study and saw Waylon standing in the corridor. "Does Dad know it now?" "Dad found out that it was me." He shrugged. "I was careless this time around." He had been confident because he thought it was impossible for Noce to track him down, but his father had managed to do so, which showed that there was at least one flaw. Although the IP address that he had used to go online for the hacking was in Octavia, it was not difficult to find out if the laptop belonged to him. However, even if Noce were to find out about it, he was not afraid. In the evening, Quincy drove past Seoul, glanced out the window subconsciously, and just happened to see Seai get into the car and leave with a male colleague. He decelerated, turned the steering wheel, and followed them. The car was parked at the entrance of a bar, and Seai entered the premises with her male colleague. Quincy pulled his car over and frowned. "This young lady just doesn't know how to be careful. She actually came to such a chaotic place with a male colleague." He unbuckled his seat belt, pushed the door open, and got out of the car. He picked up his phone and called her. But perhaps it was too noisy inside, and she did not hear her phone ringing, so she did not pick up the call. Thus, he went straight in to look for her. She was nowhere to be seen in the hall on the first floor, so Quincy circled around in the crowd until he heard some commotion coming from the other end of the corridor. Quincy followed the noise and came to the door of a private room. He immediately opened the door and was astonished by the scene in the room. Seai was grabbing a young teenager by her collar as if she was about to beat the crap out of her. 8 teenagers and thugs were on the floor in the private room, and the room was an absolute mess. On the couch was a high school student in her school uniform, and the male colleague who came with Seai was protecting the female student. Because of Quincy's sudden appearance, everyone looked at him in unison. Chapter 1564. Quincy was momentarily stunned but quickly came back to his senses. "What are you?" Seai answered his question solemnly. "I'm fighting." When the teenage girl saw that someone had come, she took the opportunity to push Seai away and flee the scene with the others. Seai was about to catch up to them, but Quincy stopped her. "What are you doing?" Upon seeing that he was blocking her way, Sadie's expression dimmed. "Get out of my way." She seemed really angry. Quincy took a deep breath. "No. Did they do something to offend you? You're an adult. How can you follow them?" Before he could even finish the sentence, the male colleague had already walked over cautiously. "Miss Quinn, forget it. I don't think they will dare to bully my sister anymore." The girl behind him was only 16 years old, and her eyes looked bloodshot as if she had just cried. Her cheeks still looked flushed and puffy, and her skirt was dirty as if it had been trampled on. Quincy realized something and suddenly stopped talking. Seai was easily disgusted by someone who bullied the weak only because he or she had a numbers advantage. If her colleague's sister had not been subjected to violence and intimidation at school, she would not even care about it. When she first entered the private room, she saw the teenage girl being bullied and beaten by several people and was forced to kneel on the floor. And her classmates watched the whole process from the side and even cheered for the bullies. She could not hold back her anger and taught them a painful lesson on the spot. No matter how old they were, being young was never a reason to bully others. The male colleague took his sister out of the private room. And only Seai and Quincy were left among the mess in the private room. Seai could not vent her anger and still felt very upset. So, judging from the past, when someone was to upset her and get her to make a move, she would beat them so harshly that the beating would leave them half dead. Now, she was merciful, because she did not want to cause Maisie trouble, but she did not want to let things slip either. She had to at least get them to kneel and beg for mercy. Alas, she was interrupted before anyone started begging for mercy. Thus, how could she be in a good mood now? Quincy could see that she was exasperated and felt helpless. Even if you've acted righteously, starting a fight is wrong. Do you want to be arrested by the police? Seai crossed her arms. You're so annoying. You think I'm annoying? If I hadn't stopped you, you would have been locked away in the precinct now. How dare she find me annoying? Seai still looked as if she was in a bad mood. As such, Quincy compromised. Okay, I won't say anything anymore. Let's go back now. He then reached out, grabbed her arm, and was about to drag her out, but she flung his hand off. Are you still mad at me? Quincy could not help but laugh. Are you leaving or not? I'll take my leave first if you don't want to come along. She remained indifferent. Quincy turned around and pretended to leave. When he walked to the door, he saw that she was still not catching up, so he turned around and returned to her. Ma'am, I know that you're in a bad mood. Let's turn our grief and anger into an appetite. Do you want to eat fried chicken or ice cream? Seai looked as if she had been convinced. She hesitated for a long time and asked, Are you paying for the food? Quincy could see that Seai was a miser. The money could only go into her bank accounts and not out. He gnashed his teeth and smiled. It's all on me. In the middle of the night, the light in Colton's bedroom was still on, and the yellowish light shone into the corridor through the tiny seam of the door. He was sitting in front of the computer desk in loose pajamas, his fingertips were tapping on the keyboard, and a chat box with a black background popped up on the screen all of a sudden. The other party was anonymous. Anonymous, do you think I can't locate your coordinates? Colton typed on the keyboard and replied. Colton, you're welcome to try. Anonymous, do you live in Bassburg? Colton narrowed his eyes as if he were thinking about the other party's information. Anonymous, it seems that I've got it correctly. Colton, so what if you've guessed it correctly? You can't break through my firewall. Anonymous, I don't need to break through anything. The other party stopped for a minute and entered again. Anonymous, I'll find you. Colton, then why not get Noce to come to me? Anonymous, do you know him? Chapter 1565. Colton was about to reply to the other party when the door was suddenly pushed open. Thus, he closed the lid of his laptop and raised his head. Mom? Maisie was in a sweater. She happened to go downstairs to pour herself a glass of water, but she saw that the light in Colton's room was still on, so she came to take a look. It's already so late. Why haven't you gone to bed? I was studying the subjects for the next semester in advance. Maisie felt helpless. It was a good thing that her son liked studying so much, but staying up so late would affect his health. It's already 1 a.m. You need to rest early. He nodded. Yes, Mom. Meanwhile, on the other end of the black chat box. The other party had stopped replying to him, so Noce placed the laptop aside. He got up, walked up to the window, looked at the view outside the window, and got lost in his thoughts. Knowing that the other party was someone who knew him, he might be the main target of the prank, and he had become even more curious about the other party. The next day, Quincy opened the office door with a slightly embarrassed expression. "Mr. Goldman." Nolan continued to go through the document without raising his head. "You're late for the first time in history. What did you do last night? Is it something sneaky?" Quincy immediately explained himself. "I overslept accidentally." "What's something sneaky?" "I'm a serious person." He had stayed up late last night with Seai until 4 in the morning. He had really not heard the alarm when it went off this morning. When he woke up, he was already an hour late. Nolan closed the document and lifted his gaze. "You have a girlfriend now, don't you?" He was startled. "No. I'm not blind." Quincy rubbed his neck subconsciously. "It's been 3 days, and the mark hasn't disappeared at all. It was such obvious marks, so even if I tried to block it, he would still be able to see it as long as he's not blind." "Okay, I don't care about your personal affairs." Nolan placed the information on the desk. "Get someone to send this information to Octavia, and by the way, tell Tristan that the hacker who attacked the Noce company is known as Sniper." Quincy took the information with a puzzled expression. "Is there a hacker whose pseudonym is Sniper? I've never heard of it." Nolan replied indifferently, "Otherwise, should I tell Tristan that my son is the culprit who did it?" The corners of Quincy's lips twitched. The hacker who hacked the Noce company's system turns out to be Colton. Mr. Goldman came up with a hacker's identity for the sake of his son. At noon, Quincy asked someone to bring the news to Tristan. Tristan went through the information thoroughly. It was well-founded and difficult for anyone to find any issues. Thank God that the company didn't suffer any loss when the hacker invaded our system. Even if there's a loss, it's difficult to get to the bottom of the incident in order to hold someone accountable. Now that he knew the Knowles did not suffer any loss, Tristan did not want to push the investigation any further and decided to let it go. Noce was standing at the door of his room, and no one knew how long he had been there. Tristan placed the information down on the desk. "Have you gotten used to life in Octavia?" In fact, he wanted to ask if he had managed to remember anything. "It's okay." Noce took a glance at the document. "Have you found out about the hacker?" Tristan nodded. "Yes, thanks to Nolan, we found him." Realizing that he could not remember, Tristan added, "He's your aunt's son." Noce did not say anything and did not tell Tristan that he had chatted with the hacker. "Okay." He turned around and was about to leave but suddenly stopped. "Can I go to Bassburg and spend some time over there?" Tristan was startled. "What do you want to do in Bassburg?" Noce looked back at him. "Didn't you say that I once stayed in Bassburg?" Tristan was silent for a while. "You can go, but Edison will have to go with you." Edison was Noce's bodyguard. Noce did not reject the suggestion. 2 days later, Leah asked Daisy to go shopping, and she clicked her tongue when she saw Colton and Daisy appearing together. "We're only going shopping, and your brother is also going to tag along as your bodyguard?" Chapter 1566. Daisy didn't understand why Colton wanted to tag along. It was probably because he was worried. "Where are we going?" "Let's go to see a musical." Musicals are boring. Musicals were a personal preference, and Daisy didn't like them. Leah tapped her shoulder. "Go with me, please?" Daisy didn't reject her. Colton suddenly took a look at his phone and said, "You go ahead. I'll meet up with you later." He hadn't only left home to follow Daisy around. She would probably be safe with Leah. Daisy wanted to ask something, but Leah held her arm. "Don't worry, Coleman. I'll take good care of your sister." Colton left hurriedly. Daisy turned around to look at him and felt he was rushing to meet someone. He walked to the garage alone until a black car slowly rolled up next to him, and the back window was slowly lowered. The man was surprised that he showed up so quickly, but before Colton could speak, he asked, "You're the one who wants to meet our young master?" Colton smiled. "Did Noce send you?" Edison Davis confirmed and said, "He's waiting for you." Colton opened the door and hopped in. Soon, the car was parked outside a restaurant. Edison led Colton to a private room, and a young man was sitting inside. He hadn't changed much, so it was easy to recognize him. Noce looked straight at the young man who walked in and slightly frowned. The young man looked familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen him before. He asked Edison to wait outside, and when he did, Noce asked, "Do you know me?" "It's more than knowing." Colton pulled out a chair, sat down, and flashed a wide grin. "I guess you really did lose your memory." Noce frowned but didn't speak. Colton put his chin on his hand. "I don't know why you would come all the way to Bassburg. Are you looking for a reunion? You seem to have an opinion about me." Noce could feel that the young man didn't have a good impression of him. He couldn't remember his past, and this person who was around his age felt really familiar. They knew each other, but he couldn't remember. He had to find out what their relationship was. Colton shrugged. "Because I don't like you." Noce narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "Figure it out." Colton smiled. "It's all right if you can't remember, because it doesn't matter. All you have to know is that you have lied to someone you shouldn't have." "Who?" "When you were in danger, who tried their best to save you, yet all you said was that you never treated them as a friend and forgot all about it." Colton looked annoyed. "You should have stayed in Yarramore. There's no need for you to show up here, just in case they see you." Noce was shocked, but recovered quickly. He had no memory, but when Colton said that, it sounded familiar, as if it had really happened. After a long pause, he asked, "Tell me, who was it?" Colton crossed his arms. "You don't need to know." Meanwhile, Daisy, who had gone to watch the musical with Leah, walked out of the theater after 2 hours, yet Colton was still nowhere to be seen. Leah went to get some drinks and handed her a cup. "I'm hungry and know a shop with nice chicken chops. Do you want to try it?" Chapter 1567. Daisy took a sip. "Well, since Colton isn't here yet, let's go." They both got to the restaurant, and Leah asked the servers for the menu. Daisy sat in her seat with her drink, then Leah turned to her. "Daisy, are you all right with spicy food?" At the same moment, Noce, who was walking past on the first floor, heard Daisy, stopped in his tracks, and looked downstairs. Leah walked past Daisy with the menu and blocked her. Noce stopped there for a while until Edison asked, "What is it, sir?" He looked back with dull eyes and walked away. "Nothing." Edison stopped the car in front of him and got down to open the door for him. Noce sat in the car while looking out in deep thought. His instincts told him that he had forgotten someone. Someone who seemed to be important to him. He dreamed of a blurry face, a lady, but he couldn't remember when he woke up. When Colton found out that Daisy and Leah were at the restaurant, he immediately went back and saw them enjoying themselves from afar. He frowned before walking over quickly and stopping at their table. "Why did you pick this place?" "Of all places." Daisy was startled as she didn't understand. "Why can't we?" Leah joined in. "Yeah, the food here is nice, so we came here." Colton squinted. "Did you bump into anyone?" Daisy chewed on the fork and frowned. "Who?" "Guess not." "If she did, she wouldn't be so calm." Colton relaxed. "Forget about it." When they returned home, Colton told Waylon about what had happened. Waylon closed his book and looked up. "He doesn't remember you anymore?" "Yes." Colton shrugged. "I thought he was pretending, but it seems to be true." Waylon put his hand on his chin, but didn't speak. He hadn't met Noce and had only heard his sibling mention him. When someone at Titus' party in Yarramore introduced him as the eldest grandson of the Knowles, he finally learned that he was the person his siblings were talking about. They had not spoken at the party, and he hadn't stayed there for long. He wouldn't have learned what happened if Yorick hadn't said that Noce had lost his memories. Waylon put down his book and got up. Since he's here, I'll go see him. You want to see him? Yes. Waylon patted Colton's shoulder. It's best not to underestimate him. If his men could find out that you were in Bassburg, it means that he isn't too incompetent compared to us. Colton smiled. Even though he wouldn't admit it, since the Victoria Business College had broken their rule to take him in, he was outstanding. The room door suddenly opened, and they both looked toward the door and saw Daisy standing there. Who were you talking about? Daisy looked at them in surprise. Noce? She had noticed that Colton was acting funny and mysterious about who he went to see. He wouldn't even tell her when she asked. When she decided to ask Waylon about it, she overheard them, and it was about Noce. Colton rubbed his forehead because his head ached. Why did she have to overhear them? Chapter 1568. Colton, you met Noce today, right? Daisy asked again. That was why he had asked her at the restaurant if she had bumped into someone. Colton took a deep breath and crossed his arms, looking annoyed. I did go see him. He doesn't remember us anymore. Daisy paused, then looked down and was quiet. Did something happen to Noce? She always thought that he... Waylon walked toward her. Daisy, Noce no longer remembers you and Colton. We hid it from you because we didn't want you to be upset. Daisy kept her head low. I know. They were worried that Daisy would react badly after finding out about Noce, but she was surprisingly calm. Daisy, what do you think? She was startled. What do you mean? Waylon calmly said, about Noce. What Noce had told her had affected her deeply, as bad as how Lisa had. Daisy was naive and trusting. They were afraid that she would repeat her mistake after finding out about Noce. Daisy pressed her lips together and firmly said after a long pause, Waylon, I know what you're worried about. Don't worry, I won't go and see him. Waylon patted her head. All right, I believe you. At the hotel suite. Edison walked into the room with some documents and saw that Noce was going through a magazine on the couch. The young man had a handsome but sad face. The soft light from outside the window shone on his face, and the lines of his face were clearly shown. Edison walked to him and looked down. I found out that was the second child of Mr. Goldman. Noce looked up. Goldman? Yes, he's Mr. Goldman's son. There are 2 boys and a girl. Mr. Goldman. Noce remembered his uncle mentioning Nolan. He was the son of his aunt. His aunt had passed away before he was born, but he had heard his father mention that before. Noce placed the magazine on the table. Leave the information you've collected here. Edison placed the files down and left the room. Noce picked up the 3 files. The first 2 were about Waylon and Colton. They looked identical. When he was going to view the 3rd file, his phone rang. It was his uncle, Tristan. He put the file down and picked it up. Tristan said something, and Noce replied, Don't worry, I'm fine in Bassburg. Tristan asked if he had met the hacker, and Noce squinted, guessing that Edison had told him. He didn't hide it. Yes, I did. Did he do anything? Noce said nonchalantly, we just had a chat. All right then, I'll be visiting the Goldman in a few days. You should. Before Tristan could finish, Noce asked, Can I go with you? Tristan was surprised, and there was a long pause from his end of the call. Wait for me to get there then. Noce smiled, looking cool. Thank you, Uncle Tristan. After hanging up, Tristan realized he didn't understand his nephew very well. Did he remember something, or are there other reasons? Alas, it wasn't possible to know. Chapter 1569. Even though Noce was young, he was hard to read, even for his father. After 2 days, the 3 teenagers looked shocked when they found out that Noce and Tristan were visiting together. Colton wasn't happy about it. How could that prick be shameless enough to come over? Waylon quietly looked at Daisy, who had her head hung low, deep in thought. Nicholas placed down his teacup and said, Colton, the Knowles are our guests. Calling him a prick is impolite. Colton crossed his arms. I just don't like the Knowles. Nicholas ignored him and looked toward Nolan. When are they coming? Nolan checked his watch. They should be here soon. Nicholas nodded. Let's get ready then. Colton got up and went upstairs while Waylon stayed there. Grandpa, I can welcome them with Dad since I haven't officially met the young heir of the Knowles. Nicholas smiled. You're acting more and more like a big brother. The teenager had studied overseas for years and had seen the world while staying by Titus' side. He had been exposed to various situations. That was why Titus had chosen him. He was mature and could take on the task of being the eldest brother. The helpers were busy getting ready for the guests, and Tristan's car stopped in their driveway at 10 a.m. The butler came over to greet them. Tristan got out of the car, and the teenager who followed after was so handsome he caught everyone's attention. From what they saw, Waylon and Colton were extremely attractive, and even when they grew up, they were still outstanding. But this young heir of the Knowles was on a different level. He looked like he walked out of a painting, absolutely flawless. Waylon stood next to Nicholas and walked out of the mansion along with Nolan. Tristan walked forward with Noce. Mr. Goldman Sr. Nicholas smiled as his eyes fell on Noce. This must be young Mr. Knowles. Noce nodded. It's nice to meet you. This is my eldest grandson, Wayne. My other grandchildren used to be your classmates. Waylon smiled. I've heard a lot about you. Noce paused and looked into Waylon's eyes. The brothers looked almost identical, but there were slight differences. The elder brother was polite but had sharp eyes, just like him. They both had tricks up their sleeves and wouldn't simply show their emotions. He seemed to be harder to deal with compared with his younger brother. Nicholas said with a smile, all right, let's speak inside. They all walked into the mansion. Noce realized that this place looked very familiar as if he had been there before. Waylon quietly observed him, deep in thought. In the backyard, Daisy had built a little wooden kennel for Goldbar. Goldbar had been having great food since it was brought home and had gained quite a bit of weight. She put out her hand and rubbed its brown hair. I'm jealous of you for having no problems. People do get more problems as we grow older. The dog didn't understand her, but she felt better. Goldbar enjoyed her petting and turned its belly upward for some belly rubs. Daisy chuckled. You're so playful. Chapter 1570. Meanwhile, when Colton came downstairs, he saw Tristan, his brother, father, and grandfather sitting in the living room. Noce was nowhere to be seen. He walked to Waylon and whispered, where is he? Waylon knew who he was talking about, the backyard. Colton paused. Daisy's there. Daisy stayed in the backyard for a while and was putting Goldbar back into its kennel when it suddenly broke free and ran away. Goldbar. Daisy was startled and immediately ran after it. Goldbar, come back here. Goldbar ran around the grass like a wild horse that had been set free. Daisy lost her breath after chasing it to a tree and saw it bark at something in the tree. Daisy looked up and saw a stray cat stuck between the branches, staring down at Goldbar fearfully and meowing quietly. Daisy rolled up her sleeves and climbed up the tree with ease. The stray stared at Daisy warily. When she put out her hand to release the trapped paw, the cat's sharp claws shot out and clawed at her. Daisy evaded it quickly, then frowned and pretended to be angry. I'm trying to help you. How could you scratch me? Daisy tried a few more times and tried to grab it by the back of the neck and slowly removed its paw from between two branches. She then cradled it while patting its head. That's more like it. There's no need to be hostile, right, Goldbar? Goldbar sat on the ground while it looked at its master cradling some other animal. It wasn't happy about it. Nolan stood not far from the tree and saw everything. The girl who climbed up the tree was so natural, and that bright smile on her face could melt snow. When Daisy climbed down the tree, she noticed someone standing around and got distracted and slipped before she could see who it was. She fell and sat on the ground while the cat jumped from her arms and escaped. She was in pain but fortunate that the tree wasn't tall. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over her, and a hand was stretched out in front of her. Daisy was surprised, looked up, and saw the face slowly get into focus. Even though time had changed how he looked, she could still recognize him. Nolan's eyes were fixed on her face, and a hint of surprise flashed across his eyes but disappeared just as quickly. "Are you all right?" Daisy looked down and pushed his hand away. "Never you mind." She stood up, patted her skirt, carried Goldbar in her arms, and walked away. Noce turned to watch her. His instincts told him that she hated him. But why? It was the first time they had met. Daisy carried Goldbar back to its kennel and placed it in. She frowned when she saw Noce walking over. "Why are you following me?" He calmly replied, "Curiosity. There's nothing to be curious about." Daisy crossed her arms and looked away. She was glad that Noce was alive but was upset when she remembered what he had said to her. She would forgive him if he apologized, but he didn't even remember her, so he wouldn't do it. Noce frowned. "Is this the first time we've met?" Daisy bit her lip and looked into his eyes. "Whatever you say." He looked at her. "So, we've met?" He couldn't remember, but from how she and her brother had reacted, they might have known each other before this. "No." She walked past him.